Thank you so much for joining us today for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and I am joined today by my friend, Scott Tillema. He is the partner at the Negotiations Collective. He's also a global keynote speaker and a FBI-trained former hostage negotiator. So thank you, Scott, for joining me today.
What's up, Misty? Nice to be with you. Nice to see you again. It is an exciting time to be on Demystifying Money.
Well, I know when I reached out to you and said that I wanted to have you on the show, you were a bit confused about what your skills as far as a negotiator would mean as far as money. But I will challenge you that all of us have had some money conversations, maybe some interactions with people in our lives, whether it's, whether you're self-employed and you're dealing with your clients, or you have a boss or a manager, or you're looking to maybe communicate what you want with somebody who maybe is not your best friend, maybe not an excellent communicator. Maybe you've had a difficult time with them in the past. And this can be in so many relationships. So I really felt like some of your skills could be very helpful to people listening who might think, I'm just in my hand, I can't deal with this person, this situation. They need to change. And I think all of us have a lot of power and control over so a lot of the situations that we're in, but we don't realize it. And so that's why I thought you might be an excellent person to talk to the listeners about how they can be better communicators themselves and maybe feel like they have a little bit more control over the situations that are really important in their lives. So, but before we get started, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you have experienced becoming an entrepreneur after leaving probably a very regimented corporate type of government, career. How has that transition been for you?
Is a wild transition. It's very different because when you work for the government, you get a paycheck every 2 weeks. And that's pretty amazing that the money just kind of shows up. You don't have to think about where it comes from. And when you work for the government, you don't really have to try very hard because you don't have to sell anything. And the idea of making money is not even a consideration, at least for me, speaking for myself, for 20 years. And now moving into the private sector, um, everything is about how do I make money? How do I support my business? How do I find success in my work? And like you mentioned, the skills that I've used in crisis and hostage negotiation and life or death conversations, I'm finding are extraordinarily helpful when I'm out here running my business because we are always dealing with people and we are dealing with emotional people and sometimes people in crisis. So, all the skills of communication, connection, influence are right on point to help us have difficult conversations. And while I would hope that none of your listeners right now are going to be conducting a hostage negotiation, all of them are going to be having difficult conversations. So it's really my goal that by the end of this episode, all your listeners out there are exceptional at managing people, managing emotions, and can confidently handle their difficult conversations.
And so with your business now, how do you work with people and how do you help them? Are you training people who are working in negotiations or are you working with more people who are just looking to become better leaders? How does your business now help other people develop those skills?
Right. So I'm doing really kind of two aspects of the business. We do corporate training on one side, where we offer training around conflict resolution and negotiation. And we have clients from HR to leadership to sales that are interested in how we use our techniques of influence. And it's not just me in my business. I'm paired up with Joanna Shea, who comes from British Petroleum, the energy sector. So she has negotiated big deals for lots of money and we kind of blend our expertise together to have this nice curriculum that speaks to both sides of the house. And then one of my favorite things is keynote speaking. So at conferences and events across the country, around the world, bringing these messages to people of inspiration, of connection, to let them know that they too can find success just by little mindset shifts on how they approach coming into these conversations with others, how they approach negotiation, how they even look at conflict. That it's really not something that we should avoid, that we need to really lean into if we want to find the success and the peace that we're looking for.
You mentioned a word that I think is probably a lot of people have now, heard of it or thought of it when you said influence. Now, 15, 20 years ago, that would not have been a career choice for people to try to be a professional influencer. But I do know that there is something to be said about influence and how important and how even in, meetings where you're trying to maybe get your point across, all of these things, the influence is definitely it's definitely a skill that I think now people are trying, are looking at these celebrities and people like that who now are getting paid lots of money to be able to, influence other people to spend their money in a particular way. But I'm curious from your perspective, when it comes to influence, how much um, how much of that particular skill do you think people really pay attention to building, or is that really something that's always just been kind of in the sales sector for people? And how can it help more of us, do a better job with whatever we're trying to do?
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't pay attention to this, largely because influence is like communication. We think that we're very good at it because nobody looks around and says, "Hey, I'm bad at being a communicator. I'm bad at influencing others." And I think we should probably note there's a difference between having a 2 billion Instagram follower account versus having the human connection of one person to another and trying to get them to move in a direction where we need to go. So I'm certainly on the latter half of that discussion on how we connect with others, because essentially that's what we're doing in our work with the SWAT team in crisis negotiation, hostage negotiation. I don't have anything to sell you. I don't have anything to give you. I certainly can't give you a helicopter and $1 billion. Maybe I can get you the pizza, but largely, we need to move people in a direction that we want them to go without being able to offer something. So my education is in behavioral science and psychology. I'm very interested in how the mind works and why people make decisions they make. Behavioral economics is an incredible field to me. It's a whole field dedicated to how people make decisions. So are we aware of any of these things and what we know about people's predictive behavior? And that's what we bring to the training for people to say it's more than tactics at the table. And a lot of people think that being a negotiator is either being very nice, yes, please, no, thank you, or being very tough and being a jerk and being hard to deal with and being a bully. And I think it's probably neither of those things. You have to understand what drives human behavior. You have to be incredibly curious. You have to be able to connect with someone before they're going to start to move in a direction that we want them to move. So when we talk about influence, there is so much to learn here. And even people in the fields of sales probably haven't been highly trained on some of these broader concepts because a lot of times, especially in what we're seeing in modern day, they have a script and they just follow the script. Somebody else did the thinking, someone else did that influence piece for them. They just need to read the script and follow through. So how many people are taking it upon themselves to say, "Hey, I want to be great at this. I want to be exceptional." And when you are, your life gets easier. You get more of the things that you want. You're a little bit happier and you don't have to work as hard. So if you're asking me, "Hey, do I want more and not work as hard?" The answer is yes. Teach me how.
Yeah, and I think that that's something that not a lot of people, I think people think of success as far as, money or titles, but when I think about people who have been like influential in my career or in my life, that usually does have a more one-on-one, like direct like impact as far as how somebody can help. And I think that that's something that a lot of the listeners are maybe service-based entrepreneurs where they might have not have a product that they can say, look at this will help you get from A to B faster. But they might be selling things like a coaching service or maybe, attorneys who are doing estate planning or even financial planning, where it's one of those things that a lot of times we're like, okay, how do we get people to understand how important this could be or how helpful this could be when they're trying to build their business? So do you think that there are some ways that people can maybe understand the people they're trying to sell to or trying to work with or communicate with better, how they can become maybe more aware of the needs of somebody else versus knowing this is great, why don't people get it?
Yeah, and how frustrating can that be when you know you have a product or service that the whole world should have, and yet you're not effective in making that happen? So my first thought would be don't sell. I think that we're very sensitive to pressure. that reactance, that immediate defense comes up when we know we're being sold to or pitched to. And if you study in Robert Cialdini's work, Psychology, the Influence, or Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion, it's an older book. It's like the Bible of influence. Talks about 6 different principles of influence, but I think that's changed over time, and there are some new drivers here that maybe aren't discussed in some of these classical works of influence. And one of them that I want to bring up that I think is a huge driver of human behavior right now in human history is the concept of autonomy. That way back when, authority would be a big driver of human behavior. I'm the boss, so you have to do it. I'm the pilot, you have to do it. And I'm the little league referee, so this is what happens. I'm the authority, and you're seeing in all these professions that's really notching down in modern times where people aren't very responsive to authority, and everybody feels they're very self-centered and their opinion is right, and everybody needs to believe what they believe. That people really want the autonomy and the freedom to make their own decisions. And maybe that was driven through COVID when we lost some of the freedoms that we had, never experienced in generations of history in the US and across the world, where we can't go to the restaurant, we can't go to work, we can't go to a different country. Those freedoms were lost with the driver of social media, where everybody now has a voice. If you wanted to broadcast something to the world 30 or 40 years ago, you would need NBC to show up on your doorstep to broadcast that idea. But right now, everybody can broadcast this across the world. So I think the concept of autonomy is notching up in people's decision-making process. So number one, are we giving them autonomy, the freedom to choose whatever it is they're about to choose? And I think that has to be the one of, if not the biggest question that I need to ask people that are in the influence space. Are you allowing someone to choose? So rather than saying, are you ready to buy? Yes. Are you ready to buy? Yes. Are you ready to buy? Yes. And somebody's saying no, 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 and they're shrinking away. And the more you push, the more they're going away from you. We're giving them the autonomy. And that could just simply be, let me give you 3 options for you to consider, this, or this, and what might be most attractive to you. And now we're starting to not get into their position. Their position might be no or whatever that might be, but now we're getting to the interest behind the position. What is it they're looking for? What is it that's important to them? And we're not asking them to make a decision, but what's more attractive to you, this, or this? And now we can start to understand, all right, this is what's important to you now. And couple all of that with asking really good questions, which is one of the foundational skills of active listening, which is what the FBI is teaching their hostage or crisis negotiators today. Being a powerful listener and asking good questions. We could do a whole 40-hour class just on that. But I would say to get started, let's be mindful of autonomy and let's be curious and ask good questions well before we even start to share anything about ourselves.
I think that whole concept of the workforce changing and things changing is so true. I've seen, a lot of different posts about Gen Z and that like in the office. And I remember when I was in corporate, even though it was, you know, 15 years ago, like 20 years ago, I remember the bosses that walked around and had to see everybody working and they wanted to exert power. They wanted to have a big desk that kept you very separated from them. They wanted a door they could shut. And it was very different than now, where that boss may not be successful just based on the title or the authority. Because, like you said, people are not responding to that in the same, necessarily the same way. Like, oh, it's good to have everybody be afraid of you or maybe uncomfortable around you. And so I think that that autonomy is very important. And to anybody listening who's a people manager, that idea of listening and curiosity and autonomy, asking people good questions, I think can be a super valuable skill to improve on based on the way things are going today and wanting people to actually help you get a job done. So I'd love to talk a little bit more about being a better listener, active listening. What are some things that people can do? And I think this can work for people who are working with clients or a teammate or even in a parent. How can we become better listeners, especially when we're just trying so hard to be heard?
Right. Right. And first of all, I would begin to frame this conversation by saying it's not about you. This is not about you. And we do exercise in our classes. We'll do exercises where people are not allowed to share about themselves, their product. They're just gathering information. And it helps us when we come into a conversation and say, I can't wait to tell Misty all about myself and all the great things I've done and my favorite food and all that. It's not about me right now. This entire conversation is going to be about you. And we have to be good at drawing information out because I think your power in negotiation comes from information and options. That's where your power comes from. And how are you going to get information and options if you aren't listening? If I'm talking to you the whole time, I'm doing the opposite. I'm giving you information and giving you options. So I want to be powerful. It begins with me listening. So it's more than just being nice or polite. It's a very tactical approach to being powerful. So, in my world, active listening skills is the bedrock, the foundation of crisis negotiation. And this goes back 50 years, and we probably stole this from crisis counselors who used it well before us. But the FBI teaches 8 skills of active listening, and this is not classified information. If you're curious on how to be a good listener, learn the 8 skills of active listening. You can pop that into Google right now. But very briefly, minimal encouragers just to let them know you're alive. Yeah, okay. Asking open-ended questions, which I think is one of the most powerful ones. Reflecting or mirroring back their actual words. Um, Having emotion labels where we're not responding to the words, but the emotion behind it. Paraphrasing what they're saying, particularly cross-cultural, to make sure that I'm not just repeating the wrong word. Um, Using pauses, silence is really, really powerful just to take a break. It can really draw someone's attention or allow you space to keep talking. Summaries to say, all right, let me gather all the content, all the emotion. Here's what we have. And then the occasional I message, which is a little bit technical, which kind of lets them know, hey, you got to knock off some of that bad behavior and get them course corrected. So in 2 seconds, that's the 8 skills of active listening.
Mhm.
And so many listening classes, especially in crisis negotiation, are around the skills of active listening. And some people poke fun at this, and kind of rightfully so, to say, well, if I have to teach you how to be attentive, and half of this is just demonstrating to somebody else that you're attending to them in the conversation. It's not enough for you to actually be taking it in. I have to let you know that I'm here, I'm present, and I'm with you. And some people give a hard time to that, say, hey, if I have to teach you that, there's other things that you have problems with as a human. I say, sure, as a listener, but I need to convince you that I'm here and present because it's not really about what I think, but it's about how you're experiencing me. And now we take that further. I think that people can see it, they believe it. So coupling the 8 skills of active listening, which is years worth of practice to move it from knowledge to skill to just becoming who you are. Now we have to couple in what we see. So with that, I'm talking about facial expressions, gestures, posture, body language, all these different things, because we show in our classes that you can do this skills of active listening, but if you're doing the nonverbals or you're doing something that's inconsistent with the listening piece, people are going to default to what they see. So now we have to be good at the nonverbals in addition to being a good listener. And it's a bit of a process here that it's not just, hey, I'm listening to you. I have to demonstrate the listening and I have to get the nonverbals consistent with that behavior. And now we're really starting to elicit that information from somebody else in a way that they're comfortable. Their defenses come down a little bit and they're more likely to share a little bit more information than they maybe should, giving you the advantage in that negotiation.
I think that attention is something that is becoming a lot harder to hold on to for people. I think that all of us have probably spoken to somebody who maybe is on a Zoom call and has their photo up, so you can't even see if they're listening to you or doing work. Or we've had people look at their phones, have people look at their watches. There's so many things that are demanding our attention at this moment all the time now that I feel like practicing being a better listener, eliminating some of those distractions, I think that can be a very special feeling for people that they might not be used to. So I could see certainly how that could make somebody want to open up, want to talk more, even like you, right? If you actually just pay attention. So it seems like a very It's certainly not an expensive skill or anything like that you'd have to invest in. But I think that shortage of attention that people are getting might really be one of the things that I think is why people are feeling misunderstood or unheard or maybe unhappy when it comes to work or other things that they're doing. So how do you I'm sure when you're a hostage negotiator, when you're doing these things, when you're speaking on a stage, you're eliminating as many distractions as possible, right? Because you have this very important job to do. How could you help people who feel distracted, who feel pulled in so many different directions where they have trouble focusing? What are some ways that we can get better at that if it is getting harder?
Yeah, I would ask, is this working for you? Are you finding success? Because if you are finding success, then keep doing what you're doing. Who am I to tell you stop doing what you're doing and change your whole life and follow my method? If it works for you, do it. But scientifically, it's been shown over and over that we can't multitask, that we can't give our full attention to multiple things at once. And then when we flip it to autopilot, that's where we make mistakes. And I can think of concrete examples where I'm on autopilot and I've made mistakes. So I would ask, why is this not an issue? Why are we not able to focus? And maybe not exactly in those words, but I want to drill down to what's the issue here? Do you feel that this person isn't important? Then maybe we do an empathy exercise or two where I'm going to have you talk to me or I'm going to talk to you for 2 minutes. And for 2 minutes, I want you to do all the skills of a bad listener. I want you to check your phone and check your watch and stretch out and look up at the sky and take notes about something so I can feel just in that very brief exercise how that impacts me. And first of all, it's hurtful. It's a bit insulting, and it's offensive when I'm trying to share something important to you, and I'm talking to a listener who's just out in outer space. So maybe allowing me to understand how that feels, how my behavior might be impacting others, but also to show how much information you're missing. That I just shared a really important piece with you, and I think that I have an advantage having done this work that I know the consequences of a bad outcome of a negotiation. It's not that my stock went down a couple dollars. It's not that we lost a piece of the negotiation that we should have won. It's that lives are on the line. So I know that every word matters. How you say every word matters. When you say every word matters. And we need to be so attentive that we don't want to miss this one thing because we'll go back and study phone calls that have been had with people that we've had negotiations with and we'll go, "Did you hear this one thing?" And in the background, and an example is, uh, police negotiator was talking to a man who was holding a hostage, and in the background of that conversation, he throws up, and she repeats, "Are you okay? Did you throw up?" What did we just learn here? Like, if we weren't paying attention to that, what did we miss? Do we think that maybe he's suffering from COVID in the middle of a hostage taking? No. He is so psychologically overwhelmed at this moment that he can't even control his own body. So let's be mindful of when we deliver our message, in addition to all the good things we've already talked about, to say, I want to be effective with somebody else, that I can say the right thing at the wrong time and not only be ineffective, but put me in a worse spot. So there's so much to take in. So for the person who is not attentive and not paying attention, we can demonstrate you are missing value. You are missing opportunities. What did I just do right here? What was that nonverbal? Is there something more here? Are you missing information? And I would bet in a majority of those cases, they would be in a much stronger position to find success for themselves, their team, their businesses, if they were really dialed in and attentive, particularly in those important conversations.
It's such a it's such a good point. And I think about some of the conversations that I've talked to people about. Maybe they've needed to have like a money conversation with their spouse or something like that. And so they'll blurt it out as soon as they've just had enough and they're upset or angry, instead of it being in a more calm environment where everyone's prepared to talk about something. And this can happen too in corporate, I need a raise, I need this. And maybe the person that you're talking to is not in the right mindset or frame of mind to have this conversation. Now you're thrown into these conversations in certain instances when you're called to a scene or something like that. But for other people who are maybe looking to be better communicators, listen, really make progress, what are some ways that we can maybe set the environment up for maybe a better, more worthwhile conversation? Because I do feel like a lot of the things that happen when we're feeling impulsive or we're feeling frustrated or pain and somebody else is not prepared for it, don't go so well. So how can we maybe improve that, even with annual reviews coming up and things like that for people?
Yeah, you touch on something that's a significant difference between SWOT negotiations and business negotiations, and that's the concept of preparation. I've gotten called at 2 in the morning. I'm sound asleep, and guess what? It's go time right now. In the business world, I know that next Thursday, I can see on my calendar, I have a conversation coming up with a conference organizer where I want to be a keynote speaker. I have all the time in the world to prepare for that. And some people say it's a phone call. This is a negotiation. This is where I'm trying to exert influence. And aren't we all doing this all the time? So the best negotiators are the ones who understand the value of preparation and use all of that opportunity to get what they want. And that could be, and we share different ideas like this around our training. It could be whether I'm coming to your office or you're coming to my office, or we're going to meet in the conference room, or we're going to go somewhere off-site. That matters because in my office, I'm very powerful. Our corporate headquarters are up on the 29th floor of a building downtown Calgary. It's pretty powerful when you come into that office and say, all right, we're sitting on top of the world. Cool. Versus, all right, now I'm coming to you. Who's got the power? And it may just be a perception, but that may matter a little bit. So how are the chairs arranged in the room? Is my team all on this side and your team all on that side? I was just working with a client out in your area, out in the Boston area, who I toured their headquarters, and in their meeting rooms, they have 4 chairs, and the table is extremely low to the ground. And it's the first thing you notice that the table is very low. And what it does is it gets rid of the barrier between you and I, and it immediately felt more collaborative. So just by some of these design pieces, we're getting into our mind and saying, all right, I feel very powerful here, or I feel powerless here. There aren't any barriers here. Am I approachable? So all these different pieces of preparation, all little bits and pieces that can help you find success. You don't know what that piece is going to be that's going to get you over the edge to get the client to say yes, sign the contract, move in the direction we want to go. But why not take every piece of preparation? And part of that preparation is actually practicing your difficult conversation. And some people say, well, we've set an agenda. The people who prepare set an agenda. Horrific. That's a great start. So at least you are leading that conversation because I've set the agenda. But have you practiced your delivery? Because we make decisions based on emotion, not logic and reasoning for the most part. So how are you going to create emotion within me? And it's not what you say, it's how you say it. So when we're giving our delivery in crisis and hostage negotiation, you may be the negotiator on the phone, the primary negotiator, but you always have a coach. That is somebody sitting right across from you, listening in on a headset. So we're face to face. It's not quite Denzel Washington in New York City looking good on a cell phone. It's you and I. And I'm listening in and I'm coaching you in real time to say, hey, let's slow down a little bit. Let's turn down the volume a little bit. Let's let's change the tone here. Let's be a little bit nicer, or maybe we need to be a little bit harder, a little bit more sharp on this one. So there's so much of our delivery that's not even considered. So are you practicing your delivery and getting feedback? And I acknowledge it would be a little bit weird in the business world for you to be conducting a negotiation, then I'm on the other side of the table, kind of giving you signs, giving you coaching. But this is your preparation in advance. Are you practicing and preparing? And are you getting feedback from people who know you? Are you willing to ask the people you know and love, hey, how do you experience me in these stressful conversations when the pressure is on?
It's definitely something that's hard to ask for feedback on. I think that is so
Yeah.
important though. And I think about even when I was I was having a lot of calls with people who are potential clients, and I really wanted them to like me. That was like my main goal. So I was very supportive, very encouraging. And then they did not become clients, and I was trying to figure out what was wrong. And so actually being in a training and working with people and having them listen and give feedback, and they're just like, oh yeah, they they don't know what you want to do next, or they feel like they solved the problem on the phone. Like, why would they take a next step? And it was something that I think having somebody outside listening to you and how you work and how you communicate, incredibly nerve-wracking and unpleasant, but very worthwhile when you're not understanding, like, what's not working here? I'm trying, all of these, I feel like I feel like I have an agenda. I'm getting all my points, but something's missing. But I think that idea of having a coach that's actually watching you and being like, okay, now you need to turn up the heat a little bit, or now you need to do this would be so, um, it's just such an interesting exercise. I could see why it's effective and why people might need it, because there's so many things that we may just miss on our own. Somebody listening would be like, "Oh yeah, no, it's definitely just not it's not clear what the next step is, or it's not clear what you're looking for." So that's such an interesting thing. If it's something that you feel like you're, able to ask a friend or a colleague or anybody, or even find a coaching program with people who are trying to do the same things as you, that could be a very valuable exercise. If you have the courage to listen to yourself.
For sure, and this is really about and just like any negotiation, what is the purpose? What is it I desire? Why am I here? And ultimately, it's about reaching that agreement and getting the contract signed. It's not about you, it's not about your ego, it's not about you being right. It's about reaching the outcome that's acceptable, and I think that's almost the definition of negotiations. We're trying to reach an acceptable outcome. So, if you get a little bit of coaching in a very safe environment where there's no consequence to it, to say, hey, I think you can get better outcomes by changing this. Or are you aware of this aspect of your person effect? Sometimes we're opening up blind spots that we're not aware of. And by being willing to take that critical feedback and then being willing to adapt and change a little bit to get to a little bit better place, we are finding incredible opportunities for success, but our ego gets in the way. We're
Yeah.
stubborn. We
Or
we don't think we need it. But if you could find more success by getting this little coaching, by getting this feedback, would you take it?
Mhm.
And the answer always has to be yes.
Yeah. Right, because the worst case scenario is you feel awkward for a few minutes. You're not gonna lose a client, you're not going to
Right.
lose a contract or anything like that. You're just going to feel uncomfortable, which we will go to great lengths to avoid. Um,
Right.
but really, in the grand scheme of things, I think that's something that a lot of business owners, a lot of people who are trying to find success or to feel, heard, could benefit from. I wanted to ask you, and this is something that, I think is really important for a lot of people. When I think about financial conversations, I think about people who are divorcing. I think about people who have a boss that, maybe they don't communicate well with. Maybe they're trying to, trying to do something completely new, and they feel, triggered or upset before they even enter the room when it comes to some of these people. And a lot of times that can be very stressful. It can make people avoid conversations. I talk to people who have advisors that they work with, that they pay thousands of dollars to, that they don't like and that they try to avoid, but they're afraid to make a change or do anything because of that, anxiety in the conversation. So, what are some ways, because you've come across people in your career and in your work that you don't agree with, you probably dislike in some personal levels and in certain ways? How can we become better communicators, even in those situations that are incredibly difficult based on our personal beliefs and feelings?
Yeah. So let's talk about triggers. If I could rename triggers for the world, I would rename it self-management. That, okay, I'm triggered. Okay, I have lost control of myself. It's a very different framework for saying the very same thing, even if it's just mentally. So if you want to work on not being triggered and manage this within a negotiation or difficult conversation, it starts right now. And that begins by identifying what are your triggers. And a lot of people we work with say, well, I don't really have any triggers. I say, really? Let's discuss some of the people in the political sphere and some Supreme Court rulings and some conflicts around the world, and tell me if you still don't have any triggers. And that gets things moving very quickly, right? So, number one, it's not bad or wrong to have triggers. This is probably very normal and natural. And a lot of psychologists say that these are tied oftentimes to deep-rooted trauma, and this could be generational trauma, which is just a normal response to a situation that might have been overwhelming, where I felt disempowered, or whatever the situation might be, that it's bringing up a reaction in us that is there to keep us alive. That this goes back to evolutionary psychology of the fight or flight reflex to say there's a threat to me. I need to stay alive. The human brain was designed to keep us alive. It's designed to see the negative, to see the threats to us. But in modern society, we don't need to run from a saber-toothed tiger who's chasing us. We need to look at the Twitter feed and somebody just said something that really goes against what I believe. So, what are my triggers? And when I experience this, what physical sensations are happening? So when I'm in this difficult conversation and I have that feeling in the stomach, or my palms get sweaty, or I can feel my face getting red, I know this is normal. This is what I expect when this is being discussed. So number one, we have to take the surprise out of it. That triggers are going to be bad for you when they surprise you. So now you can be aware of it, and we're going to emotion label ourselves. I'm feeling tense. I'm feeling anger right now. Add those two words, and we're not gonna say, "I'm really mad." Well, there's nothing we can do to change it, I'm just really mad. I'm experiencing this emotion right now. And again, psychologists will say emotions will last for 9 to 13 seconds. So to say, "Well, I experienced this thing, and now the next week of my life has been ruined." No, this is your self-management. How are you managing yourself? And, are we willing to listen to something that is disagreeable to us? I think most people in the professional space, the answer is yes, of course. But somehow we've allowed this to be acceptable, that, well, that's a triggering thing and you can't do that. And we have this belief that because it's triggering to me, it's universally triggering. And you bring in this piece of self-awareness to say, a lot of other people heard that very same thing and they're not triggered. In fact, they're not really bothered by it. And some people are really pondering that and thinking about how we can have a better conversation because they heard that. So taking away the concept of I'm triggered, so the whole universe is triggered with me. Wow, that's a moment to say, huh, maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I see it differently. And it comes back to the idea that, are you willing to change? Are you willing to see a different perspective? Are you able to hear something that we might not like? So triggers is a complicated thing, and it's years and decades of practice to work through it. And if people are triggered, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing abnormal. Know that that's totally cool. That's all right. But are you managing yourself around this concept of triggers? And the better you are at managing yourself and being thoughtful of how you say it, when you say it, what you say, you're going to see amazing results. And that comes from managing yourself, just being mindful of your triggers.
And it's important that how you mentioned, labeling the feelings, because I think there's a lot of people who say, I can't be around this person. I can't be around this, person in my family anymore, or all of these things. And that's it's something that I hear more. And it's, yes, you need to protect yourself and your mental health. And I think there are some people that you might need to not be with if you can. But a lot of times I think that it's just that self-management, that I'm feeling this way right now, but I'm not an anxious, I am not anger. I am not anxiety. Like, you're just having these moments where you're feeling that, and then being able to control yourself in those situations and realize that the conversations could improve if you're more aware of your own feelings and your own, the things that are happening to you. If you feel like you're starting to feel tense in your gut or in your shoulders or all those things, and just to acknowledge them and be aware of them, and then continue to have these conversations. Because when I'm seeing people try to just avoid, or not participate or not interact with anybody that they don't feel the same way as all the time, I mean, that's very difficult to find success, especially the more we're in an echo chamber with our social media and with our feeds and things like that. So I think it's something that people used to be able to disagree and still make progress or, get along. And so I think that's an interesting thought to just, manage your own feelings and thoughts. Um, because I don't feel like any of these, these these situations are not manageable.
Right.
It's just
Right.
a
What?
very difficult thing for some people to realize that they have control.
Yeah. What's stopping me from hearing you say something that I disagree with and responding by saying, you know what, Misty, thank you for sharing that. Would you tell me more?
Yeah.
So I'm actually asking to hear more about this thing I disagree with, because particularly if I need to respond to it, I need to have a complete understanding of what the situation is if I need to offer a solution. But so quick we got to stop you. We have to silence you. We need to cancel you because I can't hear that. Yeah, we've lost our ability to have meaningful conversations. We've lost our ability to have negotiations and conversation with people who are very, very different from us. And I tell people, allow that to be the reason that you are such a good communicator. The bar is set really low. You don't have to be great at this, but you have to be noticeably different. And in a very short period of time, intentionality, and effort, you can be noticeably better at listening, communicating, negotiating, and you're gonna stand out just simply because everybody else is so bad at it.
I think that's so true. And yeah, I like that working on those skills can be so effective. It can really change a relationship. I don't think you need two people to change a relationship. I really do think it can be one person deciding they want things to go a little bit differently. And that communication piece is so important. The last thing I wanted to talk to you about while I have you is, um, especially this comes up a lot with people's money. They want more. They want to raise. They want to be, um, they are afraid to though ask for it, raise their prices or their fees to even, they're so afraid of hearing no that I've talked to, even the firm that I took over, they had not changed their fees in 13 years because they were afraid people would leave. And I'm curious when it comes to being, willing to ask for more. What are some ways that people can get comfortable with that and maybe find more success financially or even just, with their, just with emotionally feel better or feel more because a lot of people are expecting other people to figure it out and just do it. And that's not happening.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is a big one. And uh, I don't want to be hurtful to anybody who's listening right now, but I want to tell you, nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. So, with the mindset that nobody cares about me, who has to care about me? And the answer is me and only me. So, if you are waiting for your boss to walk in and say, "Hey, I just want to give you a 5% raise because you're doing great work," nobody cares about you. This is not going to happen. So, the quicker we can get the mindset of nobody cares about you, I am the only person who's going to stand up for me. If I don't do it, it's not going to get done. This is starting to shift your mindset that I need to take action. And a lot of times we're employing social norms to the business world. And socially, maybe we shouldn't say you should do this or you should do that or ask these questions. In the business world, it's very acceptable to do these things. And what are we afraid of? We're afraid that someone's going to tell us no. What? Please explain to me when somebody tells you no, what is going to happen? Nothing is going to happen. We're going to be exactly where you were 5 minutes ago. All right. So when we can get past this fear of being told no, I want to go from I'm afraid of no to no is acceptable to I want to hear no all the time. And I'll challenge people in the sales world to say, if you're not hearing no, you are not trying hard enough. For the people who brag, everybody always says yes to me. I always win. I always close the deal. You're not trying hard enough. You wanna, "Hey, I always get booked as a keynote speaker." You know why? Because I charge people $10 for an hour. Yeah, alright, we'll hire that guy, great. You're not asking for enough, you're not trying hard enough. So if you're not hearing no, you need to try harder. You need to stand up for yourself, and the more I can desire no, the more people that can tell me no, the more people are gonna tell me yes. as a speaker for conferences and events, they have these calls for speakers for big conferences. And I'll put in at conferences where Bill Clinton is the keynote, well, where Mel Robbins is the keynote. I want to be speaking at conferences like that. And if I'm not trying to be told no, how am I ever going to hear yes if I'm not embracing no? Um, and one other mindset piece here that I want to try to shift in your listeners' minds is, who do you negotiate for? Do you negotiate just for yourself? Who is impacted when you find success in your negotiations? And I'll bet 98% of the time, it's not just you. When you use the word we, who are you talking about? When I use the word we, I'm talking about my family, my kids, maybe my business partner, maybe my best friend. So if I'm getting more value in what I'm doing, who is winning? It's not just me, it's we. So I tell people I don't negotiate for me, I negotiate for we. And think of how that changes your mindset. That when you don't ask for a raise, who loses? Your family, your kids. When you don't ask for more time off of work, who loses? Your family, your kids. So it's not about you. It's not about being polite. It's exercising business norms, getting what you deserve because nobody cares about you. If you're not going to do it, it's never going to happen. So little bits and pieces here to maybe encourage people, ask for more, get what you're worth, and do your homework. So you're able to justify it when somebody says, why this number? You can come back and say, well, here's why, and here's the comparables, and here's this, and here's that. And you can justify the ask. And that makes it really difficult sometimes for them to say no. And even if they say no the first time you've planted that seed, she's asking for a raise, maybe do we need to be concerned she's going to go elsewhere? Now the thought is there that, hey, everything was content before I heard you ask that. Now there's a lot to consider. So maybe if not right now, maybe sometime soon. So some thoughts on asking for more and not being afraid of no.
Yeah, I think that it's super important. I think we've all seen, I know that I've seen some people who post like the horror stories. Like I was negotiating salary and I asked for more and they rescinded it. And people say, oh, yep, good reason, store that in my brain not to do it. Like
Yeah.
there is a risk. And so I think, in those situations, that might be a red flag as far as that company to begin with, or some things like that, but for most of us, and people too, the people you look at that you think have all these opportunities and that have been so lucky, I'm guaranteeing they've been told no a lot,
Ton.
tons of times. I'm sure Mel Robbins has been told no lots of times. I think that a lot of us, forget that and we just see the highlight reel and we think that everybody, oh, it's so nice that people came to you and asked you to speak at this conference, Scott, not knowing that you're applying here in the background and hearing no and hearing yeses. But I think being, and it is something that just like any other skill or thing you practice, I've gotten, rejected so many times that it doesn't bother me. Now it's almost like something I know, and when we've worked in a group together, we'll actually just share it. Like, oh
Yeah,
yeah, got a no today. Because it means we're trying.
for sure.
We're working on
For
it.
sure. I have a group chat with some friends and I'll just drop them a line. Hey, got another rejection today. And
Yeah.
they encourage it. Hey, why has it been
Yeah.
so long since you've gotten rejected? Why aren't
Right.
you trying harder?
Yeah, no, I and
Good.
I think that's just one of the it seems like, oh no, you should just kind of wait for those sure things. You should, maybe price yourself right here so people don't think, oh, that's too much. I think there's a lot to be said about if you're hearing yes too often, that maybe it's time to look at your fees, or maybe it's time to look at the opportunities you're going for and see if there's somewhere that you can maybe push yourself a little harder. So these are all such amazing tips. Um, for listeners who would like to learn more about your company and maybe follow you, I know you share a lot of different tips, including every Taco Bell that you go to. How can people follow you and find out more, Scott?
Sure. We are at negotiationscollective.com or my work as a speaker, scotttillema.com. But really, just I'm a real person. Let's connect on LinkedIn. I trust most of your listeners have a business profile on LinkedIn. I'm a real person. I manage my own account. So you connect with me there, say hello, and we'll have a real conversation. And, certainly if you're looking for more on any of this around conflict resolution, negotiations, training, or keynotes, please reach out. And I love doing this stuff. I love working with people to help them achieve more and get past some of these barriers that are holding them back. So if I can be of service to anybody out there, please don't hesitate to reach out. And don't be afraid to ask for what you want and what you desire and go make it happen.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you everybody for listening. I hope you learned a little bit from this conversation. I hope you'll put it into practice when it comes to that next conversation that you might be dreading. And also, don't be afraid to, to try to hear no. And I think that the more we can share these kind of stories with people, the more, the better we will be at getting that success and in reaching those goals that we have. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again next week.